you're in such a unique position to be able to give us a really good, I suppose, insight into this. So, Lee, what do you feel is going wrong in kind of Western culture that you have found some kind of semblance and peace ultimately in the East? And what can we draw from those kind of places and reintegrate into Western culture?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I must say that I am not necessarily that up to date with what's going on in the West. I've only recently become aware of it. Really, all of the identity politics and all of this quite purposeful division, trying to divide people, because that's what it seems to me to be about. And now, I am of the belief that essentially, the more solid your sense of identity and the more separate that you feel from other people, the stronger your identity. Generally, the more you suffer. So yeah, and the less, the path of, because my kind of area of speciality is sort of meditation and mindfulness and perhaps kind of Buddhist philosophy. And really, the deeper and further you go along that path, the less you become. Right? You just become less and less. The sense of Li becomes smaller and smaller. And the sense of spaciousness and openness and sort of pure awareness becomes greater and greater. And so I believe that this, in the West right now, we've got all these identity politics. We've got all these, they're trying to put you in certain camps. They're trying to put certain labels on you and say, well, you're this and you're that, and you should hate each other. Now, in Japan, they are much more of a collectivist society. They don't care so much about the individual. And how does this manifest? Well, if you're walking down a street, for instance, everyone is so polite. Everyone will give you your space. There's never anybody who's getting in your face or giving you trouble. There's never any sort of social unrest. It's very calm. It's very quiet. Now, this has its downsides as well. But this sense of kind of discipline that they have on a countrywide scale is quite remarkable. And they even have a concept that's called like gamansuru, which means basically like put up with it. Right. And so they are very good at putting up with a lot of the stuff that life can throw at you and just kind of getting on with it. So I think perhaps one thing is this kind of is humility and this ability to weather the storm, as it were, and to put up with things and to, and also perhaps to think about the bigger picture rather than yourself, because this feeds back into this idea that the more separate you feel, the more you're going to suffer.
I want to pick up on just the initial point you said there, because I find it fascinating, and I find myself in a similar way trying to communicate to people who cling on to those you mentioned labels and groups. You hear it all the time, the group that you belong to, even my football team versus your football team, my religion versus your religion, etc., right? And this idea that you find or found yourself kind of becoming less and less identified with Li, this character that I inhabit, Li, right? And I just had a moment there and thinking how scary that might be for a person to start to move down that path. So I guess I'd love to hear a little bit more on this idea where moving closer to God, moving closer to peace, moving closer to, I suppose, acceptance, truth, and love actually starts by relinquishing your very grip on who you present yourself as a person, as me, Joseph. And again, people know me as a Newcastle United supporter, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that sense of identity. How will I introduce myself? How will people know what I am?
Well, okay, so ultimately, let's say, for example, you sit down and you do meditation. At the beginning, essentially, what is meditation? Many people have this misconception that you sit down and you have this instantly calm mind. No, let's just dispel that straight away. A calm, focused mind and sort of serenity and stillness, these are the results of a skilled practice. This is rather like sitting down at a piano and expecting to be able to play Beethoven's Fifth Symphony with ease. So once you are a skilled practitioner, then you can have this sense of stillness. How do you get to that point? You get to that point by sitting down and facing distraction, and you recognize the distraction, you release the thought, you relax, which is the most important step. Why? Because every time there's a movement unconsciously of the mind, it creates tension. Over the course of a day, that will exhaust you. And so you relax that tension and you return to what your object is. And that might be your breath, that might be your full body awareness, I personally use the object of loving kindness because I find that to be very transformative.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what you're doing there is you are modifying your behavior. You're modifying your systems of attention. Oh, okay. I've become distracted and I'm relaxing and I'm coming back again and again and again and again. And what you tend to notice, the same thoughts crop up. I think we have like 80% of our thoughts are roughly the same thing. And this because they are based on our attachments. I'm a Newcastle United supporter. You know, I'm jacked. I'm talking about you. You know, I'm a successful creator. Whatever it may be, that kind of root attachment creates all of these different myriad thoughts. But over time, if you keep kind of recognizing, releasing, and coming back, there's a certain amount of fuel in those attachments. And each time the fuel diminishes, and eventually it will run out. And then quite often you are faced with this deluge of kind of thoughts and sensations and ideas related to this attachment, and you have the ability now to skillfully let go of the attachment. And when you do that, you kind of pluck out this attachment, you let it go. Now your mind naturally becomes quieter. And so in this sense, really, the path is a subtractive one. You are letting go of more and more as time goes by, not building up. Although you will build up these, you know, all kinds of different abilities, but you are letting go more and more. And so, yeah, over time, you just naturally become less and less. There's less of you. There's less of Lee. You're questioning every single facet of who Lee is, or of who Joseph is, or whoever it may be, and you are becoming less. So that's. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's it's really transformative, and I think again, it's I think for somebody who maybe doesn't have a sensitivity towards the kind of areas that we work in, the kind of areas that we practice in, again, it can feel very, very scary, this idea of subtraction. I'm often said that I believe the solution to many modern neurosis is predicated in subtraction as opposed to, you know, addition. You know, we think, oh, it's something we need to add in order to find peace, tranquility, that kind of inner composure, that inner stoic. But in actuality, it starts by, you know, taking away some of these things. And I don't know, it's maybe remarkable to even, you know, go a little bit further and explore that mind of the individual who is so constantly swamped by these neuroses and think, well, what do you mean? You mean I can be in a place where I'm not getting anxious every day or stressed and be in apathy and be in depression? I don't think I can imagine a reality like that. And I think even now that I ponder this idea that a lot of people are maybe even addicted to that inner turmoil, to have some kind of point to kind of focus on. There's this idea that I constantly quote that I don't think you ever get rid of your problems. I think you just trade them in for higher quality problems. So, you know, once you solve the, I don't know, let's say the issue that you can't pay rent, and you realize, oh, I don't have a girlfriend, you know, and I'm lonely. You know, there's always something that comes over the horizon, and you're never content. But you know, the practices that you're I suppose not just practices, but lifestyle and philosophy in which, you know, that I found, especially in Eastern practices, promote, is that letting go, is that letting go idea. And people are probably wondering now, well, what if I let everything go? What then remains?
Well,
what then remains, Lee, if I let everything go?
Well, indeed, yes. Well, I mean, just talking from personal experience, moments where you truly surrender to what is, you would think that sounds terrifying. And quite often it can be. In the beginning, it can be. As your mind is going into these ever greater depths of stillness, you're like, oh my God, what's happening here? And then, you know, you kind of come rushing back. But if you can really let go into this true stillness, into this true calmness of mind, this unification of mind, these are the most satisfying states that you can possibly experience. These are states which nourish you in a way which nothing else can. No food, no porn, no sex, no women, no alcohol, nothing can nourish you. And really, I think this is what we're looking for when we're going out and we're trying to we're taking in all this stuff, and it gives us this very temporary satisfaction, but it often takes something away as well. But it never truly satisfies. And it becomes this endless wheel of sort of samsaric, dualistic pleasure seeking, and we're never satisfied. So true satisfaction comes from really allowing the mind to become unified and collected and calm and just becoming very simple. And all the thing that you were looking for in all of that searching, all of that striving, you find it there. And it's like, oh, it was always here. All I had to do was see it, you know.
I don't know if you ever read the book. One of my favorite book. I recommend this book more than any others. Is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Right. One of the opening chapters is there's a beggar, and he's sitting on a bench or something like that. He's begging for money, and I think like the second or third person that he's begged for, he goes, you know, you're sitting on a box, right? And he goes, yeah, so. And he goes, have you checked what's inside the box? And opens this box, and there's loads of money and loads of gold, and that's the kind of the idea that you're perpetuating there. I really agree with all of that. It's been true in my meditative practice. I like to call that difference, or that distillation between pleasure and joy. You know, one is fleeting, one is cheap, one is very, very finite, it's transient. And I believe it. I believe it. That I mean, I don't just believe it, I think I know it. When you, because I've been in that pleasure seeking cycle, and you know, you think you can find it in sex, you think you can find it in drugs, you think you can find it in alcohol, but again, it's this very transient feel that you get. But when you learn to let things go and actually sit in stillness and surrender, that is joy. That is being so content and far more satiating and permeating. And it's the true fullness of the moment, and that's what I think Eckhart Tolle was trying to convey in his book, and you know, other contemporaries who've written similar books on the subject. And it's remarkable. It really is, and you can't believe you can feel that level of fulfillment just by being present.
Well, isn't it wonderful?
Off some of those neurosis.
Exactly. Isn't it wonderful? All that we were seeking, and this is the problem, right? No, this is the case that many people find themselves in, is that they are seeking and seeking and seeking, and they get to an old age and they're like, I still didn't find what I was looking for. So, you know, what the hell was the point of all of this? And very often we realize too late that it was always there right in front of our noses, and all we had to do was let go of all the things we think we are, which really ultimately are just guesses. Yes. And I often talk about this on my Twitter. It's like, you know, I am XYZ. I am a man. I'm bold. I'm British. I'm whatever. All of these different attachments which cause all of these neuroses and all of this overthinking. And it's moving into this I am state. I am. I exist. And I acknowledge my existence. Everything else from there is abstraction. And it's funny you mentioned Eckhart Tolle's book, because I remember when I first got into meditation, I actually bought that. It was one of the first books I bought. And I was convinced about meditation, because all these different kind of isolated groups of people from the ancient world they all had a meditative practice. So I was like, there must be something there. And then I picked up this book about mindfulness, and I was like, nah, this is rubbish. And not realizing how intrinsically linked they were. So